My understanding is that for the white population, we're about maybe 30%. 30 overall for the institution is 32, 34, somewhere in there, over 6 years. So to an extent that we're not serving anyone well, I guess you could say, there's an issue. But to the extent that you have a subpopulation that is in the single digits, my sense is that if that is improved, the overall graduation rate goes up too. So it's not like it's an either or zero-sum game. It's not. And I know that some people talk about Proposition 2 and, oh, you can't do this and you can't do that. Most of the critics that I've encountered haven't actually read the law. They just say what they think, and usually it's couched in terms of what you can't do. But Proposition 2, Proposition 209 in California, 201 in Washington, they all speak to the fact that as an institution, you can have programs that are targeted to students of color. But what you cannot do is to deny opportunities to other students who want to participate in those activities. So many people would trot that out and say, oh, you can't do anything. It's not true. People are doing things all over this country, in California, in Washington, in Nebraska, to support their students of color in spite of those so-called anti-affirmative action laws. Because the way the laws are written speaks to actually providing opportunity, but not denying opportunity. So that brings some context to what we're talking about. I hope that helps. Any other questions? Or yes?
Give a couple of examples of programs that have been successful that you think would be good models for our university.
Well, SOB is one. The institution that I like to point to, and I hate to say it, but it's my alma mater, The Ohio State University, has a complex of programs, services, through what used to be called Office of Minority Affairs, or OMA. They even have a center for African American males that was founded by, Todd Bell, who was a football player there, played for the Bears, passed away recently, but left his estate to Ohio State to form the Center for African American Males. And all they do is research and support students. That's all they do. But Ohio State is probably one of the major places that you could go. University of Cincinnati would be another one. Trying to think, Cal Berkeley would be one. U of Michigan and Michigan State both have very comprehensive and targeted services for students of color on their campuses, and have had them for the last 30 years.
Delilah Owens pointed to a few programs at Michigan State that she thought that he might do well to emulate.
The STARS program at Michigan State is excellent in terms of creating an environment for students to come. And the students primarily meet in the evenings, but they have what they call small, and you hate to call them encounter groups, but that's what they are, where students come together, they share family stories, they share deaths with one another, they share all kinds of personal information for one another, and they're mixed, male and female. But they provide that support system that the students need in that environment there. We were introduced to it maybe a couple of years ago at a conference that we went to at the University of Michigan. And so I think that there's a lot of room for us as an institution to serve these students better, and by extension, all students better.
Henry, I would be interested in what peer institutions are doing, more like Temple and Cincinnati rather than Ohio State and Michigan, because those are flagships and they've got campus communities that are large. What are places like, what's Temple doing? I didn't get to go with the group to Temple. Has Temple done some things in that regard?
Temple has done what I would refer to as a shell game. And what I mean by that is that for all of the underprepared students, many of whom live in the surrounding Philadelphia area, they make them all go to community colleges first. Then what they say is, you can come to Temple if you earn your associate's degree and or a 3.0 with a scholarship. But the graduation rate for students of color in community colleges is 23%. So if you look at the washout rate at the community college level versus starting at a four-year institution with the right support, you know, people love Temple, but Temple ain't taking the same students we're taking.
Okay, that's
I'm gonna put it
important
like
to know,
that.
but-
But people will tell you that, oh, Temple is this.
Well,
you
what
need
does
to look-
Cincinnati do? I mean, I think Cincinnati has a different model too. That's my alma mater, but I have a PhD program. But Cincinnati has a slightly different model too.
They
Also,
do.
they have more students on campus and the whole suburban thing. They're more in-city students at the. So I suspect. So there's no Milwaukee. None of these peer institutions are doing, or Birmingham.
The model
Those
that I've
kind-
heard
uh-huh.
is Georgia State
Yeah. Okay.
in Atlanta,
Yeah.
which would be similar to
Yeah, it
us.
would absolutely.
They're a fairly young institution.
Right, but they have some model programs that work well in this regard.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So Georgia State would
I'd
also
like to look
be
at what
a
they
strong
have,
peer.
Any other questions from anybody who has not had a chance to ask a question yet?
Yes.
I have a question. So I know this is not really applicable to the study right now, but of course we also have to, do you have a feeling of how differences at the level of high school experience factor also in here? Because there of course are differences in terms of the condition public schools or the school system in the cities right now compared to the suburbs.
I asked the students about urban-suburban differences. And from their perspective, you know, one of the common things was there's a divide between, you know, the guys that grew up in the suburbs and went to school in the suburbs, and then the guys that came out of the city, and how they relate to one another. But when they're encountered by the broader institution, they're treated the same. You know, the divide is only internal. But the sense is that having bring up different experiences to campus, they don't socialize together by and large, unless they're playing basketball. I mean, to be quite honest. Or they're playing cards in the student center, you know, which if people laugh about folks playing cards in the student center, but a lot of the retention literature speaks to the fact that that's a valuable retention tool. And you hate to say it, because I look at them sometimes, and you know, I was in the student center doing my participant observation as part of this study, where I sat there for 2 hours and I just watched people play cards. And I watched all the African American males and what they were doing, and who they interacted with, who they talked to, how they went about socializing with one another. And that's where they had their fun. Then I did a participant observation in the rec center. And I watched the young men play basketball for hours on end. And then I went to the library and did a participant observation. And one of the things I found in doing that was that the young men would join in groups to play cards and socialize. They would join in groups to play basketball. They played ball with 4 brothers they didn't even know. But they wouldn't study together. You go to the library, everybody's an individual carol. Every one of them. Which is interesting in and of itself. But part of that is socialization. Part of that is being taught, well, you got to do this on your own. The fun stuff you can do in groups. In other words, we out-individualize the idea of being individual. So, you know, what I've discovered is that the African American men won't study together, but they'll do everything else together. And that's one of the things that SOB tackles, because SOB has group study sessions where the men come together. And what we're finding is that the young men were hungry for a place where they could come and be actualized, be supported in studying with other men. And that's another study for another time. And probably somebody with more expertise than me in psychology or something. But when you look at those issues, and you look at the graduation rates, it's more than just the institution. Some of it's also, like I said, the young men. And many of the young men that come into SOB, for instance, and they come to the study sessions, it doesn't matter where they're from. They kind of blend together. Yes?
You spoke earlier about this incompatibility with